good afternoon, and good evening to some of you. Thank you for joining the webinar. I'm Khalid Musali, Executive Vice President at Compliance Group, and I'm honored to run this webinar today to discuss the CSA in the era of QMSR. And hopefully most of the folks on the phone are aware of the QMSR. We'll talk a little bit more about it today. But in the meantime, I just wanted to, well, I guess I'll take this opportunity just to promote Compliance Group and who we are. We are a high impact, efficient, and expert partner for life sciences companies navigating tight timelines, limited resources, and strict regulatory demands. Our mix of life sciences, processes, expertise, flexible onshore, offshore resourcing, and technology implementation. Please expect good news coming out from CG in late May or June. Makes us a strategic ally in your growth journey. Again, three big buckets here: specialized staffing, strategic consulting, technology solution. I was at a conference yesterday at ISPE, and literally my message, we're a baby Deloitte, baby Accenture, but we're small, very mighty. All right, I'm gonna move on to my panelists. It's literally an honor here, guys, just to have Garth, Cisco, Hillary, and Jason. These two in the bottom, you know, they were my clients, and now they're working with us. This is an honor. This is literally an honor, so I appreciate you. And of course, having Garth and Cisco, friends and colleagues for the past 10 years fighting for CSA. So I would love for each one of them just to give one word, and then we'll move on just a little bit about you personally. So Garth, we'll start with you on the left. Oh, I picked the wrong guy because he doesn't have a mic. So we'll start with Cisco.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Great to be here and great to have an opportunity, you know, coming in and experiencing this from the other side now of the world. I look forward to discussion, the webinar, right? Because I think the idea of what's happening with QMSRs, I'm experiencing it right now. There's a lot of panic over it, which I think doesn't necessarily need to be there. But great time, and hopefully we look forward to helping somebody move along with these situations here on the panel.
Great, thank you, Cisco. Hillary?
Yeah, hi everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hillary Driscoll. Also, like Cisco said, just really happy to be here. Looking forward to a good discussion today. And I think just to piggyback off of what Cisco was saying, I think there's some really positive changes here that work really well with CSA and the critical thinking, you know, that kind of mindset. So excited to talk through this topic today with you all.
Great, thank you, Hillary. Jason?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Dow. I'm a principal consultant with CG. You know, to echo what Hillary and Cisco said, you know, honored to be a part of the webcast, really hoping to be able to provide you guys just some practical, real world advice that you can use as you navigate the QMSR, your CSA implementation, and, you know, really just that entire framework that's kind of changing the industry.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jason and all. Garth, do we have audio or not yet? That's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. I heard you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay,
yes.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. So audio difficulties. Thanks everyone for having me as part of this. Looking forward to the discussion. You know, I think it's an important subject matter as we look at how CSA and QMSR come together from an overall perspective. So looking forward to our talk here.
Awesome. Thank you, Garth. Thank you again. All right. So for decades, computer system validation, which is the CSA predecessor, gave us a very prescriptive playbook. We validated, we documented, we ran IQ, OQ, PQ, and in many ways it worked. But it also gave us something else: a compliance culture focused on generating records rather than demonstrating real software assurance. And I loved when I read about the QMSR that it's really not focusing on documentation anymore. It's really focusing on the process and how do you assess risk, etc. Well, I'm going to let my colleagues here speak to it. They're the expert from the industry. Then came CSA. The FDA draft was in 2022, and as all you know, the official final was in 25, and finally it was issued here recently, revised, I would say, to supersede the one released in September 24. And mainly it was more cosmetic, according to my friend Daniel Walter, who's actually part of the FIXA team after Cisco ditched us and moved on to be in the private sector. Daniel took definitely the lantern here and driving it, walking us through it. So, and Daniel, I think you're online, so I appreciate you being on here, sir. So again, it's aligned with risk-based approach in alignment with ISPE GAM 5 second edition. And this message specifically to my friends from the pharma that the CSA is not just for medical device users. Consider process risk for the use of system tool to determine rigor if testing required. It included examples of documentation expected. And last but not least, it literally replaced or supplemented the FDA general principles of software validation that was issued 2002, supersede section 6 about validation of automated process equipment and quality software. Just to note, the title of the CSA guidance has changed from quality system software to quality management system software. And again, this is an alignment with the QMSR. So what we really want to, so what does it really mean to us, you know, the CSA in the era of the QMSR? It means your risk files, your URS, your test protocols can no longer exist in separate silos. Design traceability is now the corrective tissue that ties them all together. And FDA inspectors are starting to ask for it. And I did get a confirmation yesterday from a good friend of mine. I can't reveal his name. I met him yesterday. Today we have these folks to really walk us through. I have a few questions set up for them. And the objective is for you guys on the phone to write your question in the chat or in the chat box or on the, by the way, I have one screen, so I can't see literally what's going on. If somebody's making fun of my face, I can't see you. Please place your questions, any questions you have on your mind. We'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. My first questions, and I'm going to direct it to our friend, ex-FDA, Cisco Vicente. The FDA shift from CSV to CSA was already a philosophical pivot. Now QMSR adds another layer. In plain terms, what has fundamentally changed about the assurance means, and why does it matter for teams still operating in CSV mindset?
So I think this is an interesting question, a way to look at it, right? Because when we started the concept of CSA, it was really moving towards the idea of focusing away from just checking the boxes and creating all documentation because you thought that's what the agency needed or wanted, and looking at a risk-based approach and critical thinking. If you look at the premise of QMSR, right, that's really what's littered throughout everything in the way it's structured, right? If you look at the ISO standard, it's implicitly written, right? It's not implicit, it's explicitly written, right? It was implied before with the 820s. So I actually think, you know, when we planned and talked about the draft of CSA, we knew that we were moving towards this final rule at some point in time and wanted to make sure we were already aligned. So to me, the change just makes it much easier to support. And it actually, from the investigator standpoint and the way they're targeting and approaching things, makes it also much easier to have the discussion on, right? You don't have this debate of, well, we're applying CSA, and then people not knowing what that means. They're starting from that risk-based traceability and that critical thinking as part of what the QMSR is looking for. So I think talking about CSA and being better poised to have that conversation is where companies who've already started it are probably going to be, and that's probably where a lot of the other companies need to be moving towards, right, with any part of the process. But since we're talking about CSA here, that's, I think, a focus point.
Awesome. I'm going to move to my good friend Garth. And what's your thought on that same question? I can repeat the question if you want, but I know you've already digested it and you have the answer.
No. I think, to me, the alignment piece here, I think is really important. And not so much that it changes what we've been doing with CSA over the last several years, but, finally, when you look at QMSR, it really brings in the concept of risk being centric to everything that you're doing, and the connection of all of your processes together through a common sort of methodology or approach about dealing with risk. CSA, that transition from CSV to CSA, was really about centering on risk related to software validation. So I think there's a huge alignment in between the processes or the concept of what's driving forward. So I don't think QMSR changed anything. I think the transition from CSV to CSA was important. It was risk-based, or it drove that risk-based approach, and QMSR now sort of matches up to that or coincides with that. So I think they're very supportive of each other. But even under the original regulations, when you look at the QSRs, I don't think there was anything that prevented you from having a risk-based approach to what you were doing. So I think this is a continuation and a reinforcement of what's really important to industry as a whole, which is centering around risk.
Absolutely. Thank you. The next question I have, and it's going to be to my friend Hillary. I guess, I'm sorry, it's actually going to Cisco once again. No, this is going to Hillary. What is most common misconception you hear from clients about this shift?
It's a good question. I think a misconception is that by just like revisiting our quality manual, for example, that's sufficient, or updating terminology. I think kind of building off of what Garth and Cisco were saying, I think it's the shift is really more in our mindset, moving like from a compliance verification to really checking the effectiveness of the whole system, right? The effectiveness of the end-to-end, the holistic QMS. So I think it's more about system maturity versus documentation updates. And I think that's a common misconception, just as an example.
No, makes great. Sounds good. Garth, a quick question for you. Quality system inspection technique, QSIT. I think you're the most knowledgeable about this, and you've dealt with it most of your life. Was our safety net. It was structured, predictable, and defined by clear boundaries. That safety net is being pulled. Why? And I have a follow-up question, so get ready.
Yeah, so obviously, the QSIT methodology in terms of inspection has been in place for many years, or was in place for many years. And with the transition to the QMSR, there was a need also to realign, both internal to FDA as well as industry's thinking on how do you approach audit and how do you approach addressing systems and concerns along those lines. So QSIT officially went away February 2nd of this year. There was a brand new release from the FDA talking about the new approach to inspection and audit, much heavier focus on sort of risk management and management responsibility takes a very center stage associated with this as well. So I think it's important to understand that it's not just about the approach of a kappa plus one, as everyone had become used to, or a kappa plus two on a system approach. This is really about examination of how your systems are interacting together, how you're managing risk throughout all of your processes, and just as important, how management is providing oversight over that entire program. And I think that's what you're going to see the transition as the audit program comes through and those requirements begin to be observed as inspections happen. We've actually seen it in some of our areas as well already.
So you think it's placing a lot more accountability or responsibility on the leadership, not just reviewing management review on a quarterly basis and say, yeah, you're all good, move on, right?
Yeah, so I personally think that was a common misunderstanding of ISO 13485 to begin with. Everybody looked at management responsibility as, okay, I do a management review once a year, twice a year, maybe 4 times a year, depends on your particular location, and I check the box and I move on. And that wasn't the intent when ISO 13485 was developed. The management responsibility or management oversight is supposed to be the review of your entire system and the effectiveness of what you're doing. It ties in the resources that you're applying, the structure of your systems, the new regulations or requirements that are being applied, all the mechanisms that you're using to ensure not only compliance, but quality of the products that are coming through. And the challenge is, I don't think that industry had that focus on that's what management responsibility was. I think everybody was looking at it more of a check the box activity. And because of that, we lost sight of the fact that there's much more that comes along with it. And that responsibility for ensuring that your systems are tied together and work as necessary is critically important to everyone.
Great, thank you. Any follow-up, Jason? I see you've got some opinion on that. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's kind of hit on it, but I'll be blunt. Like, I think the regulation updates that you're seeing is just a signal to the industry that we're not appropriately assessing risk, right? Whether it's the QMSR change, whether it's the implementation of CSA, I think folks that are looking at, to Hillary's point earlier, if I just look at my framework, if I just look at my quality manual, and I update some terminology, I'm going to be in alignment. As Cisco and Garth both said, there isn't really anything in QMSR, there isn't really anything in CSA that was not already the expectation under QSIT, under CSV. In my mind, the signal that's being sent is our people, our processes, our technology, and our products are becoming increasingly complex. And we have to focus our effort on the things that have the highest risk. We understand that we can't dedicate 100% of effort to 100% of the work that we're doing. So what we have to get as good at as an industry is understanding where we get the value out of that 100% effort, right? I'll give you an example. If your user requirements, functional requirements, and risk assessment is assessing risk as failure to meet this user requirement will lead to potential impact, therefore it's a high risk, therefore I'm going to test everything, you're not understanding the mentality that the regulatory agencies are trying to shift in our minds. Not everything is equal. Find the things that are going to be riskiest to the patients and then dive deep into verifying those, testing those, bringing them to management review, understanding how those processes work, put the effort and focus there. So I think it's less about the framework. I think it's less about the documentation, and agree with Hillary, Cisco, and Garth. This is a reset of risk management principles. And I think you're going to continue to see this in continuous regulatory updates.
Awesome. A follow-up question to that, and I think I'm going to start with Cisco, but then I'm going to go on to the rest of you folks. And again, I know, Cisco, you're no longer with the FDA. However, you probably have some insights, or I don't know. If an FDA investigator walked into a company today, what would tell them that the organization truly understands CSA and QMSR versus just relabeling old validation practice?
Oh, that's interesting. So part of it is when the company goes and owns the risk discussion right from the beginning, right? You know, the investigator is going to come in, or they might ask you, you know, what you've done or how you've tied this to risk. But being able to demonstrate right from the get-go, you understand it. And I think, as Jason mentioned just now, right, what's different is they're going to be looking for that linkage and traceability. Garth also mentioned it, right? It's always been there, but that's not where the focus has been. And you could see the investigators now are teasing out that risk thinking from, you know, where it comes from in the original design spec and how it carries through your entire process, and then how the loop closes back up again. And I can speak to it having gone through the experience very recently, right? They're more attuned to that cycle, which I think is actually a positive, because what they're looking for is that true integration of that risk approach throughout the process. If you can own that piece, you know, I think you've already gone a long way to demonstrating them that you've got the right linkages and you've got the understanding and the control. You know, if you just wait for the specific questions along the way, you're going to probably piecemeal it, or you'll start to understand even as you start answering where the breaks are in your system that you've not paid attention to.
Jason, I'm going to get your input on that because you've been through that game before.
I have, and you know, agree 100% with Cisco, right? I think from a logistics perspective, if I'm an auditor and I'm starting looking at, say, a validation effort for a computerized system, I'm going to start with the risk assessment. And if what I see are only numbers or classifications, and I flip the page and I don't see any dialogue that explains those classifications, and I don't mean a paragraph, right? A detailed outline of the business process, what the risks are, what the downstream and upstream controls are, what the monitoring protocols are. That's really going to lead me to believe that we're continuing with kind of the basic risk process. I'm assigning a number, I'm assigning a classification, and therefore I'm making a blanket determination of the level of testing that I'm doing. However, if I turn that page and I see a detailed white paper, or a detailed documentation that walks me through that risk assessment process, the people we brought together, how our process works, what those risks are, what residual risks are there, and being open and transparent that there are these residual risks, but here are all the other controls that we have in place to help us detect it. And if one of those risks should pop, here is what the ultimate impact to the patient would be. If I see that level of detail, I can start to genuinely believe there is a thorough and robust evaluation of risk. But if I see what I see mostly in industry right now is an Excel table that comes out with a 3, 4, or 5, a low, medium, or high. If I look at a risk assessment that says if I don't meet this risk, that's a risk to the patient, therefore I'm going to test all this. It just comes down to I'm demonstrating that I'm not testing things in the risky areas, which leads me to believe that I'm spending a whole lot of time on things that are not value added, right? From a patient perspective, from an organization's perspective, just to check the box, right? And as Cisco said in the very beginning, that's the exact opposite of what the regulations intended. It wasn't create a document, it was document the value decisions that you made.
And just to add something, because unfortunately something has come up and I've got to jump off, but to that piece, and having gone through it again also very recently, you know, that notion of it's in the spreadsheet, it's in the table, this is what your guiding principle is, without being able to explain why that matters and where it comes from, isn't going to fly, right? There's going to be a lot more of that discussion that happens, and you have to demonstrate as the, you know, you're as a manufacturer, you are the expert in the process, the product, and what's going on there. You have to demonstrate that you know where it comes from, that you own it, and you know, you can actually understand the impact of that through the process.
Great. Thank you, Cisco. I know you have an urgent, stop here. So thank you so much for joining us. I just want to, you're relieved. I appreciate you just being here.
Thank you.
All right. Now that he's leaving, now we can talk about him. All right. Just put on the screen here, to me, and again, we're talking inspections, right? Just to help, again, our attendees who really face these things or who've been operating under the QSIT. So here I put a list. Again, this is Khaled's list or maybe ChatGPT list. Please help elaborate on that. And I'll start with Jason and then Garth and Hillary, if you could.
Yeah, again, I mean, echoing what we've kind of already talked about. I mean, irrespective of where you're applying this, whether you're a med tech or medical device, organization, and you're operating under QMSR, at the end of the day, being able to explain your process, understanding what is going into things is far more important than having the name of a deliverable and having content on that deliverable. Right? If you're looking at your DHF, everything in your DHF should be supporting your risk-based approach to how that device was designed, how you're going to verify it, any of the studies that you've done, any of the validation work that you're doing. And whether it be from one inspection technique to another, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot from the regulatory agencies on their approach to inspections. Because again, the message that we all really need to understand is the expectations haven't changed. We're seeing these changes in the regulations because as an industry, right, collectively, we're not meeting the target. Not because we're not putting in the effort, not because we're not putting into the hard work, but we're misunderstanding the shape of that risk-based approach. So yes, you might be used to having specific deliverables, you might be used to performing validation in a specific way. What I would challenge folks going from QSIT to QMSR, going from CSV to CSA, it's really that mindset shift of understanding why I'm testing what I'm testing and really challenging yourself to say, am I testing the appropriate things? Because if I'm testing 100% of everything, I know I'm not getting the value out of it that I need to be able to demonstrate appropriateness to the regulatory agencies.
Thank you, Jason. Garth?
Yeah, sure. So, what I'll add into this is if you look at one of the changes that came out with QMSR and the sort of adoption or the incorporation of ISO 13485 is the base in terms of what we're doing. One of the restrictions in the past was around FDA accessing things like management review and content associated with that. And I think, as I mentioned before, the importance about management responsibility. I think one of the things that's going to come to light as part of all of this is if your approach in the past has been more of a check the box with management review, you're going to be challenged under this new regulation. And the reason being is, if you think of how a quality system functions, where you have multiple sources of data or information about how things are performing, and you have processes in place around analytics and trending and measuring and dashboards and things that are appearing to be headed in the wrong direction, are things that would normally escalate to management. And if that's not occurring in your process and landing with your management reviews and your discussions, then you're demonstrating the fact that you have disconnection within your quality system. I would also encourage that as you're looking at management review and the items associated with it, that if all you're reviewing is compliance-related measures, then you're also missing the mark on what risk is supposed to draw into your processes. Risk is around the products that you're producing, and your measurements and your controls have to be around that as well. And that has to be funneling up through your management review and your understanding of performance. So all of this, we talk CSA. CSA is a great measurement of risk associated with software, but how are you applying or understanding that risk on an ongoing basis? Risk doesn't just exist at the time that you're deciding how you're going to validate the software. It also exists in the operation of that software on an ongoing basis. And I think you have to have that mindset that you're constantly evaluating the risks in your process. You're measuring the things that are appropriate with your business, and management is involved in the review, the understanding, and the application of resources to address the problems you have. And that has to be the approach that you have within your company.
Thank you, Garth. Hillary, anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I think probably what I'll add is maybe just a rephrasing or of what Garth and Jason have already noted. I mean, I think what I take away is that with this shift, like in the inspection model, right, from more subsystem based to this holistic end-to-end review of processes or evaluation of processes for their effectiveness. I think it underscores the importance of us really understanding the big picture and how things fit together, how they interact, where things touch each other. If I have a complaint and it feeds a CAPA, and then the CAPA feeds a risk register, and the risk register feeds a management review, and the management review feeds, risk-based decision making and resource allocation and all the things. I think that flow of the risk, right, is really important. And I think, Garth made the point, it's a living thing, right? And keeping up with that, tracking it through the process, being able to trace it. Versus I think how we're used to operating like in our silos, right? A lot of us are used to that. So I think that's really just an important point I'm hearing. Just wanted to reiterate again. I think it goes back. I hear a lot in my experience now, well, we have a procedure for that. We have a procedure for that. But then when you ask people, okay, well, how do you demonstrate that process is effective, that it's actually working for you and doing for you what you want it to do, what you need it to do to mitigate risk to not just the software requirement, right? If we're looking at CSA explicitly, but to the business, to the patient at the end of the day, because that's our underlying objective and goal, of course, right? So I think reframing how we think about things, like I've heard check the box. I love that term because I love and hate it, right? I think we need to really challenge ourselves to get away from that. It's not having the procedure in place. We need that to follow, but we're really wanting to make sure that procedure is effective for us. So I think those are the points I would add to what you all were saying, because I completely agree with the points made.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much. And what I love about hearing here, the consistency of the wordings, the mindset, the checkbox, continuous, monitoring. And again, today we're not talking AI, but all of those we need. And I know who's passionate about this, Mr. Garth Conrad, about AI and in the quality space. So we'll have one episode on that. I just want to take a break from my scheduled questions. I'm seeing a few questions from the industry, and I would love to address them. The first one is saying, I'm writing to seek some clarification and health authorities' expectation regarding the periodic review processes in our system. Specifically, I would like to know if it is mandatory for QA oversight to always be involved in various review processes, such as system validation review or the annual user review. I hate to say yes, but but I'll pass it on. Anybody would like to take this question and answer it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab first, and then maybe love to get Hillary and Garth's perspective on it as well. I think this is maybe asking a different question, so I'll do my best to kind of address it. The short answer is yes. There is an expectation that quality is involved. But I think this question is maybe getting a little bit more specific. What is the role of QA in each of these processes? Because what a lot of organizations will do will say, well, quality oversight is going to be quality signing off on the documents. And so you start to see hundreds of deliverables come through where QA is a required signatory, and that may or may not be providing you value. So what I would say is if your question is, should QA be involved at all? Yes, that's a regulatory expectation. If you don't have them involved, that's going to be a very difficult sell. What I would say, though, is analyze your process on how QA is involved, right? Garth made the point earlier around management review. There's also the concept of quality review and quality oversight. So maybe QA is not signing off on your periodic review documents. Perhaps that's a download in your management review. Perhaps that's a download within your quality review of here were the results of our aggregate periodic reviews over this period. An audit that I went through previously, I won't mention the company, but I will mention the auditor, Justin Boyd, had a very famous quote to us that we took away. You cannot risk assess away the need to meet a regulatory requirement. You can put a risk assessment together on how you're going to meet that regulatory requirement. So whereas traditional organizations might use a QA signature to say, hey, QA signed it, they provided that oversight. In my mind, an appropriate assessment demonstrating we're providing this information to QA on a routine basis and elevating things when critical items appear would be another methodology to meet that requirement. That's my take.
I completely agree, Jason. I think in my experience, I mean, again, yes, there is a regulatory expectation that QA is involved, but to your point, exactly how that's done, how that's implemented, I feel that there is room to reevaluate that. I think the signing off on deliverables, for example, is what we historically see. That, you know, that's what I'm used to. But where I worked last, I know we were working to change that model from like that QC function, right, of reviewing and signing off a document to more of a partnership and reviewing metrics, reviewing trends across implementations, and getting QA's input and independent review in that capacity versus just approval on a requirement spec or a validation report, for example.
Love it. Garth?
Yeah. And I'll just add into it that, you know, I think you have to think broadly about the intent of QA oversight as well. You know, obviously at the task level, when you talk about QA oversight, it's really trying to drive the notion of an independent review of content or output, such that you have that protection that at that time that tactical level of activity was being done correctly. Does that have to be someone who has quality in their title? The answer is no, and most organizations know that. The broad sense of the regulation that talks about quality oversight can also be accomplished through quality function examining the processes that you have within your organization, and whether you're following or you have documented processes and following your processes, not at the tactical level of did you sign off this particular report, but are you following a defined process which ensures the level of control and the level of quality of output on what's occurring. So I think you just have to frame it in that manner, that quality oversight doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. It depends on the level that you're at in the organization, and you have to consciously apply that piece of control to make sure that your system is functioning the way that you really want it to.
Awesome. I hope we answered that question. I thought it was a very good question, and it needed the expert to really weigh in on it. So thank you all. The second question, I think it's related to what you said, Jason, on the Excel. So what evidence, if not the Excel and spreadsheet, will assure investigators that the manufacturer did their due diligence?
Yeah, and it's a fair question. So I'm not suggesting you not have that summary. What I'm saying is that summary shouldn't be the end all be all only document you have. Right? At the end of the day, you have likely brought many folks together over many conversations, had many discussions, and ultimately ended up with a classification, right? Ultimately ended up with a score. What I'm saying is that Excel spreadsheet or that summary should be the first of many, many, many pages of your risk assessment. So I would look at it as an investigator and saying, okay, here's the summary, here's how I classified everything. Now I would like to understand the detail, right? And the equivalent, the functional equivalent I would give to that is an auditor looking at your summary report, your final summary report for validation. They very rarely stop there, right? That gives them an overview, it gives them the approach that you took, it gives them that summary level. But when they want to dive deep, they start going into the documentation itself. And what I would suggest from a risk assessment perspective is that you have that level of detail, the summary of those conversations, the dates that they occurred, the people who attended, the topics that were discussed, the risks that were identified as requiring mitigation, the risks that were identified that mitigation is not required because they don't meet the threshold to mitigate, right? If you are presenting a risk assessment to the regulatory agencies where you've identified you've mitigated every risk or no risk remains, that is a giant red flag, right? Risk cannot all be made to disappear. There are going to be risks that stay, but you have to be transparent and here are the controls that are in place that if that risk pops, we're able to monitor it and it doesn't have an impact. So a long-winded way of saying don't get rid of the Excel spreadsheet. But many, many organizations, their sole output of their risk assessment is that Excel spreadsheet. And numbers and classifications don't tell the story. They're just the cliff notes. And in our industry, the cliff notes are not everything that you need.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the next question because we got like 5 more questions. And thank you, audience, for this. Now I'm ditching my list of questions. So guys, we're on our own now. We're not prepared for it. No, I'm just kidding. You're out prepared for this. We got the best. So the next one is what metrics or KPIs best demonstrate CSA maturity to FDA under QMSR? Feel free to jump and take that question.
I'm thinking.
So I'll jump in. So stepping way back, what's the point of CSA? The point of CSA is really to apply a risk-based approach to understand the controls over your software systems that you're applying. And you apply a varied level based on the risk that you're observing. So the outcome of that is you're putting systems in place that are functioning, that are operating on a daily basis, and you have measurements of that performance. So the best measurement back to FDA under the QMSR is how effective was your risk-based approach? What are the problems that you're experiencing with the software? Do you have bugs? Do you have errors? Do you have things that your users are identifying that you didn't identify as part of your initial validations or your controls you put in place? And if you have those measures in place and you're perfect, you have no problems, then it says that your risk-based approach is working, right? You're addressing your issues up front. You've got no major challenges with performance of the systems that you're putting in place and operating. So that's the best measure, is it's a measure of effectiveness of how well you're applying your risk controls.
Awesome. Again, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna ask one for one. So I'm moving to the next question. Can the panel share their thoughts on what are manufacturers' responsibility for a SaaS platform validation that is outsourced in the light of QMSR and CSA?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and then Jay and Garth, if you want to add. I mean, at the end of the day, the manufacturer, if we're outsourcing to a SaaS provider, we're still accountable, right? So the SaaS provider may be responsible to perform the disaster recovery testing, for example, but as the consumer, the user, the manufacturer, I'm still accountable for that. So I still need to be able to, in my opinion, right, to articulate what that provider is doing. It does not excuse me from understanding that big picture that we were talking about, right, that end-to-end process. There's just other parties now that are taking responsibility for certain aspects of that system's life cycle. That's a high level answer, maybe just to start kicking off the conversation, but I don't know if Jay or Garth, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, just from, again, more, in the field kind of logistics extension of what you were saying, I think if you answer a question from an investigator and you say, I don't know, the vendor handles that.
Ooh.
No good, right? Like, again, you may not be responsible for it, right? To Hillary's point, maybe the vendor is responsible for backup and restoration. Maybe they're responsible for disaster recovery. But at the end of the day, you as the sponsor or the license holder or the primary organization is ultimately accountable to say, this is the due diligence that we've done. This is our understanding of how that supplier provides this service to us. And this is how we mitigate the risks that have come up. But there's been too many organizations that I've partnered with, I'm sure that Hillary and Garth have worked with, where they treat the outsourcing to a SaaS provider as they handle everything, we don't know anything about it. And every single time I have that conversation, I say, take the IT out of it and let's look at something non-IT related. Would you answer that same way about your CMO or your CLO? And you would say no, right? I know what my CMOs are doing. I know what my CLOs are doing. Even if they're doing the manufacturing, even if they're doing the testing, I know what those processes are. I know what my quality oversight of it as the sponsor or the license holder. Don't change your processes just because it's IT. IT, we like to pretend some of these problems are new, but they've actually been solved in other areas. Now, appropriately apply what you're supposed to those areas, but don't treat a SaaS provider from a framework perspective any differently than you would treat a CLO or a CMO. The level of detail, the level of risk, completely different. Totally respect that. But don't make up a new framework because it's IT, right? Look to where we've solved this problem as an organization or as an industry in the past and borrow those. And know what your SaaS provider is doing. Know where the risks are, right? If you are entrusting your data to a third party, you need to understand as an organization, if that vendor no longer provides that service, where is your data going? Right? If they have a failure and their business continuity and their disaster recovery processes don't work as expected, what's that impact to you? Right? So then maybe you elevate those risky items into your supplier questionnaires, to your periodic reviews, to your periodic audits, right? Don't do 100% of everything, but focus on those critical areas, and a third party, whether they be providing CMO, CLO, or raw material or IT services, all have a unique challenge that you have to account for.
Love it. Love it. You're just saying everything that I have in my mind, but love it. Question 5. I would like to gain some, and I like these questions because I know Garth is going to jump on it. I would like to gain some insights regarding the FDA's current expectation, well, Cisco's not here anymore, for AI validation. As we continue to innovate and integrate AI into processes, it is crucial that we stay aligned with regulatory standards. So really the question is, what is the FDA current expectation? If you can share, maybe Garth, because I know you're in that.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't want to speak for the FDA, but I think, in all honesty, everybody's still trying to figure this out, including the regulators. I don't think that there's a lot of clear information. But the guidance that I regularly get into this discussion, both internal to the company as well as with external companies as well. And, my guidance to folks is this. So there's a clear regulation that's out there. This is the European AI Act. And you always want to start with that. That will give you some framework in terms of classification of your system, and it will give you some guidance in terms of your approach, what you may or may not need to do. And the biggest thing that I can encourage people to do is to clearly document what it is that AI is doing, what the use case is, and what the outcome of it is and what you're doing. And when you understand truly how you're using AI and what information, value, or action it's providing for you, it leads into the activity that you need to do associated with validation. If you feel uncomfortable sitting in front of a regulator and explaining to them that you used AI to do something, that probably tells you as a gut feel that you should have done validation on. If you have all the comfort in the world about what you applied and the reason why, the use case in that particular case wouldn't lead into validation activities, then you should also feel comfortable talking about that to any regulator that's within your facility. But I would tell you to follow your process. Use the European AI Act to start, move to CSA and understand the risks based on the use conditions that you're using AI for the output, and that will lead you into the actions that are necessary associated. You can use the ISPE guidance document to give you some ideas about the level of control or the type of controls that you apply in validation, but it's the combination of all of the above. There's not a simple, easy, one single answer to this question. And part of the reason why is AI is many things. It's not as simple as just saying it's a chatbot that we're using an LLM for versus it's an agent that we've created that analyzes procedures, or it's a agentic flow that has multiple agents that are doing things autonomously and interacting together. So it's all of the above, and it really depends on your particular use case and the expectations that you have out of that process.
I told you guys, Garth will jump on this. He loves AI. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Jason, you've got your hands up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Garth 100%. I mean, I also don't want to speak for the FDA. I don't work with them. I don't work for them. But I will say, based on conversations and meetings that we've had with organizations and industry groups, I'm not sure there's as much concern about the validation piece of AI as there is the ongoing use, monitoring, and where is it appropriate to use AI. So to Garth's point, absolutely, there's going to be discussions. There's going to be how did you validate it. But in my mind, I would almost look at it as, it's going to sound weird, but think of your qualification, validation, and your ongoing monitoring of AI more apt to how you continue to monitor the qualification of people versus how you monitor and the continuing qualification of computerized systems, right? And the reason that I say that is when we look at equipment and we look at systems, we generally are looking at them as, I give an input, I get an output. Every time I give that input, I get an output. And that is almost the antithesis of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Because at the end of the day, most of the AI algorithms and models that we're dealing with are not always going to provide the same output, right, that you're going to get through an input. So in my mind, the demonstration of the engineering qualification of an AI model is going to be absolutely important to demonstrate. But in my mind, what you're going to see more questions around are how are people using it? What decisions are they making? How are we ensuring that it's keeping up with the additional data that's coming in? How are we ensuring that organizations are not just relying on the AI algorithm to be right? These are the things that I think we're going to get challenged on in combination with the qualification. So I would warn any organization that thinks that if they've got a great validation package for their AI, they release it and they don't do anything else. I think you're going to start to see conversations about, well, how are you monitoring it? How are you ensuring it's not sending people down the wrong rabbit hole? How do you ensure it's updated with the latest information, that it's not drifting, that people aren't just, hey, the AI told me this was the right answer, I'm not going to verify it, I'm not going to keep that human in the loop, because it's human nature. If a computer told me and it sounds reasonable, I'm going to go with it. And we've seen too many examples outside of the pharmaceutical industry where things sounded good, they were put in place, and then we start to see some hiccups. So in addition to the validation piece of it that Garth talked about, which I think is absolutely critically important, don't stop there. I think there's going to be even more of an emphasis on continuous monitoring and continuing qualification, so to speak, for your AI models. So during that validation planning, make sure you've got a good plan for how you're going to monitor it and keep people in check while they're using it.
Another example of that process, right? Sorry.
Awesome. No worries. Did you want to add?
I was just saying, Holly, if I can just add in one last thing. Sorry to build on Jason's. So the one thing I would actually encourage people to do if you're really concerned about validation of AI is the first thing that you need to look at in your use application is whether you're relying on a probabilistic model or a deterministic model of your answers coming back. And it's really, if you don't know the answer to that, then you probably don't really know how AI is functioning within your system. Because if you can turn that probability model into a deterministic model, you have a much easier case in terms of validating and controlling your AI system and what you're doing. And there are many techniques for being able to do that. And I would encourage folks, if you're really using AI and incorporating it into things that you're doing, you've got to be conscious of that fact in how you're designing your systems.
Awesome. All right. There's two questions. I know we've got literally 1 minute. So the first question, I just need a yes or no, which I think most of you, let's see what the answer is. Given there are normally more resource restrictions in a small company than a large one, how do you see a small company under or approximately 100 people meeting the new requirement, and I'm assuming referring to the QMSR, meeting the new requirements? Would a smaller company be expected to address the same level of risk as the larger global one? My quick answer is yes. I just want to get a yeah or no from you.
Yes.
Okay, yes?
The only, very quickly, the only thing I would add, I think a smaller company is in a much better position to meet the requirements. They're fully upgraded, they understand, they usually wear multiple hats. It's easier to keep an eye on the bigger picture than when you're a 100-person organization. You can kind of keep your finger on the pulse a lot easier than if you're a 50,000-person organization. So I'd say use that as your advantage.
All right, the other one that caught my eye, which is, I think I would like you guys to answer that also really quickly because we're definitely out of time. Okay, with the new inspection guidance, I'm seeing a lot of comments that FDA is going to be expecting to be able to log in to your systems themselves. Thoughts?
That's no different than any other inspection.
Yes.
In my mind, nothing's changed to allow that. Many investigators have walked onto sites I've worked at and said, I want to log in, I want to navigate the system myself. They follow the processes that you've set up for everybody else to gain that access, or you give them a shadow. But I don't see anything in the regulations that changes that expectation. I believe that's always been the case.
Agree?
I think the thing that I would add in too is I think what I've seen a shift in our inspections, and it's not just related to QMSR, it's just in general of this moving towards digital platform, is it's no longer about the FDA requesting something and then you delivering a paper-based artifact to them. Much more is digital in nature in terms of real-time accessing systems and showing them the information within your system, not producing a paper artifact that you're bringing in and handing to them. So whether they log in or you're navigating live on the screen, I think people need to be prepared much more for that's the approach that how audits are going to occur or inspections are going to occur in the future.
Yeah, I'm just gonna basically just add one thing, and I'm typing it in here. Please take a look at the ISPE Good Practice Guide on digital validation that was just released mid-2025. It gives quite a bit of guidance on how to proceed with that. Because we all need to understand virtual inspections are happening, and they're happening a lot more, specifically as organization move into the digital transformation that we're living in. So that's going to happen more often. You're not going to be bringing those big stacks of carts to your audit room. So yeah, I would say, yeah, be ready. We're in a different, and finally, more of a question and comment, and I think this is good for everyone to hear, and thank you for sharing. The AMMI 34971 has some good information for assessing and managing AI specific risks. Thank you for sharing this information, and this will be also shared with all the attendees. I think we're really at time, actually way over time, because we're supposed to be done by probably 15 minutes ago or 18 minutes ago. But thank you, everyone. Panelists, thank you. I'm going to have to invite you to another one. I mean, invite you to dinner and then invite you here again, because this was great, guys. I'm getting a lot of, look at all the love we're getting here. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out. Appreciate you very much. Thank you for taking the time in the middle of the day to do this. Thank you, and have a great week.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye all.